Hello everyone. Last week I was reading the Wall Street Journal and I came across a full-page paid advertisement from Harley Davidson, which I will put up on the screen so you can see it. But basically they are complaining about the increase in the tariff on American-made motorcycles going from 6% to 56%. And in this ad that is signed by the CEO of Harley Davidson, it says that these import tariffs punishes Harley Davidson and our European customers and dealers in a trade dispute over steel and aluminum, which is not of our making. Motorcycles have no place in this trade war, and 88 European and American associations agree with us. Remove the tariffs, united we ride. I can't disagree with anything that Harley says in this advertisement. However, I do disagree with something that Harley did, but failed to mention in this advertisement. I'll tell you about it in 15 seconds. Hey everyone, one of the things that Harley Davidson failed to mention in this advertisement, with their being against these types of tariffs, is the fact that Harley Davidson about 40 years ago petitioned the U.S. government to impose tariffs on Japanese import motorcycles. So I see this advertisement and what they're doing as hypocritical. So if anything, they should have at least admitted to their own urging of tariffs back in the 1980s and at least acknowledge the fact that they are guilty of it, but they didn't even do that. So with that, that's what really bothers me over this deal. It's as if Harley Davidson is for tariffs when it positively affects their bottom line, but they are against tariffs when it negatively affects their bottom line. So just to give you a little bit of history for those of you that weren't around in the 1980s, but in 1983, Harley petitioned the U.S. government to impose tariffs on Japanese imports. Because what had happened was, from the early 70s to the early 80s, Harley Davidson's market share of their segment of the market went from 75% to 25%. Why? Because all the Japanese motorcycles were taking over those segments, because they had motorcycles of various styles, and clearly they were more reliable and they were cheaper. So instead of making a better motorcycle, or a more affordable motorcycle, Harley asked the government for help to impose these tariffs, which went up to almost 50% starting in 1983, to make the prices for all motorcycles over 700 cc's more costly, and to basically persuade people, if they're going to pay more for a motorcycle, then they could buy the Harley Davidson. Me and my friends happened to be in the market for motorcycles during this era, and from my own experience and some of the experience from others, we had no intention of buying a Harley Davidson just because the Japanese motorcycles were more expensive, for a couple of reasons. First, just on principle alone, I was not going to buy a Harley Davidson. This left a bad taste in my mouth, asking the government to intervene in what should be a free market. I had no interest in helping Harley Davidson win back a share of their market. And number two, if the Harley Davidson motorcycle didn't appeal to me at whatever price, increasing the price of the bike that I wanted wasn't going to shift my desire to still buy a Harley Davidson, which I didn't like either on style or on reliability. So I was willing to pay more, and so was everybody else that was in the market for motorcycles that I knew. We were all willing to pay more for the bike that we wanted, rather than to be basically duped into buying a Harley Davidson. So we didn't have any part of that whatsoever, and we bought the bikes that we wanted regardless of price. Of course, I'm not going to get into the whole history of what happened during the 1980 tariffs, but a lot of the Japanese motorcycle manufacturers basically dropped a lot of the 750 motorcycles down to below 700 cc's because those motorcycles were not impacted by the tariffs. But anyway, You can research that if you want to, and that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is where are we today? But I will say this, one of the things that did happen after the 5-year tariffs expired in 1987, by 1988, Harley's market share had gone back up within their segment, by the way, because they only made large CC bikes, and that's what I mean by when I mention in Harley's segment. Their market share in that segment did go back up to 50%. Now, what we will never know is whether or not that was a direct result of the tariffs. You will read a lot of times that, yeah, because of the tariffs, that's what kept Harley from going under. Well, it's hard to quantify that. So unless we basically polled people who bought Harley Davidsons back then and said, hey, did you buy this because the cost of Japanese motorcycles went up? Did you really want something else, but you chose the Harley because it was now on par as far as price? So I don't even know how they would go and sort all that out, or how they even make that call today that is exactly what saved it. Maybe sales did go up, and that's how they're judging it. But either way, that's long since gone. Harley Davidson is still around. And again, they were for tariffs back then, but now they seem to be against it. So it's definitely hypocrisy, to say the least. Overall, my position on protectionism and tariffs in general, well, basically all tariffs, I'm against it, flat out. It has no place in a free market, and all it does is hurt the consumer. So it's making the consumer pay more for something, and that money is now going to the government, who's just going to waste that money anyway. So it does nothing for the manufacturer of the motorcycles, except hurt them if their sales go down. But either way, the consumers are paying the price. So, and that's just not what the free market is all about. Let the customers decide, the consumers decide the market, and let the prices play out where they will based on supply and demand. Now, coincidentally, as I am recording this video, which is on a Monday, and you are going to see this, you're watching this on Friday. So just 4 days ago from the time you're watching this, today the news was released that the European Union for now has called off the tariff increases. So the trade war as of today in my recording appears to be over. So this started a few years ago. That's what led up to all of this. And right now it looks like they've called a truce and the whole thing is over, which is fine by me. Again, like I said, I have no interest in this. I can't support tariffs at all by any country. So again, it just hurts the consumers all around the world. But the one thing I will say, though, again, because of Harley's lack of disclosure in this, and I do understand, because I know all the Harley fanboys out there are going to be upset. Harley can never do any wrong, but they should have at least acknowledged that even though it was prior management, maybe even prior owners way back when in the 80s, nearly 40 years ago when all of that took place, they should have at least acknowledged it and said, yeah, it was wrong then and it's wrong now, but they didn't even do that. So they're hoping in this ad that people don't know that, or they have short-term memory and have forgotten it, or they have forgiven them because they managed to survive. But either way, that's the part that rubs me wrong. So if tariffs ever do come back and they affect Harley Davidson in some fashion to where the consumer has to pay over 50% more because of that, Harley will get no sympathy from me. You know, what's that saying? What goes around comes around. So anyway, I'm glad to see that the trade war is over because it wasn't just motorcycles that were affected. Many other goods were affected as well. So hopefully we can put an end to this nonsense once and for all. But that's all I have to say on this. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. See you next time.